boy, I hope Blake's here tonight or we're going to be in trouble with the tech. It's a true story, ladies and gentlemen. 3D Politics Live once again just now on Facebook, coming to you amazingly through all of the technology. We might have one thing worked out tonight, and that is the smooth fade in and fade out of the music, which has been distracting me for 19 months. We've got an amazing show for both of you planned. You know, they're still searching for remains out there, and they're still looking for reparations out there, and they're still pushing scientific fascism out there. And let's also bring in, of course, thankfully, my cohort, David Oldham, connecting to audio as we speak right now. David Oldham, can we hear you?
There we go.
Perfect.
And I'm, yep.
Oh, very good. I mean, I got one thing accomplished this last week, and that was I've routed my music to where I can fade in and out smoothly with my, oh yeah, there it is. See, it's much better than it was. David Oldham, how you been?
Good. Are we on live?
We are on live. I even checked that. I struggled last week. Was just last week. Hats off. I gotta say,
it ended up being a fabulous conversation. I really enjoyed it.
It was great, and I really want to have Al back on again. Al Gerhardt, from the co-founder of Sooner Tea Party. I want to have him back on again for the live experience, because that's where the pressure is always on. And it's more exciting that way, because, Blake is there. And now I bring up Blake jokingly, but he is our sonar radar out there. He's the guy that lets us know. So, and I will tell you, I was waving my arms, just gesticulating wildly, and I'm using two sets of headphones 2 weeks ago, and I accidentally unplugged one set enough to where I couldn't hear Van Kirk coming in, Justin Van Kirk coming in, and it was only Blake that told me via sonar radar out there that he could hear Van Kirk, but I couldn't. So it was really, there it is, Blake Barber. Hey Blake, I can see you're there. Blake Barber, thanks for saving me 2 weeks ago on the technical glitch. I've worked through all that problem we had not going live last week, and here we are. David Oldham, thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate you being here to help me discuss all this stuff. Remains found out there, the Tulsa grave diggers, I call it, and then reparations, a lawsuit, which is, I think, really where the meat of that is. Scientific fascism is a term that I want to talk about concerning the national mask mandate. That I got that term from Mark Levin. And I want to get, David Oldham, your feedback on Governor Stitt extending the state of emergency. And how emergencies are allowed, I think, constitutionally, et cetera. And then the real juice I want to get into with you is the idea of textualism. We talked last week about stare decisis, having to do with precedent. And I want to get your information about what is constitutional textualism, historical view, the legal ramifications, and the colloquial application. I mean, how do people in our, everyday world utilize? But before we do that, snow days were always an issue when you start arguing with the public schools, because you realize pretty quickly that they're not really worried about, teaching the children as they are how many hours they can legally count on the clock to pretend they were educating, as opposed to, so we get into the snow days. But look at this here. And you would think that with all of the online learning that we're doing, with the hybrid understanding of the way things work, get this from Jordan Miller, editor-in-chief here, OU closes campus due to winter weather. Now, remember, they've gone to all online So it's hard to get across the internet. But listen to this. OU's Norman campus will close at 3 p.m. today. This is October 26th today. They closed at 3 p.m. today for all classes and activities and will remain closed all day Tuesday, October 27th, with no online classes, according to an OU alert, due to internet activity and power accessibility challenges. And they're they're going by, the National Weather Service is what I pay the tuition to OU to make sure to teach my child. Oh my God. I mean, this is just horror. And road conditions, though, at the end of the story, road conditions are available, if you need. But what I'm saying, they've gone to, what I know is that the year we enrolled, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, Oldham, so don't seduce me into it. Thing is, yeah, I know you're really dying to hear this one. Here's the deal, though. I sent my she wanted to go to OU, my daughter, number 4. So she goes to
Right.
OU. That was the year that all the stuff came crashing down around Boren, President Boren.
Okay, right.
Now, right after that came crashing down the realization, we paid the tuition and got accepted for so much for whatever our scholarships and money was worth to go to that school. Then they raised the tuition at OU 25% after we'd already qualified for whatever was supposedly going to be the charge. So we had to make up the difference there. Then everything came crashing down around Boren, and you found out, well, he was something. And then later you found out they were actually falsifying their academic records. You remember that routine where they falsified the actual accreditation? And so I want my money back, especially with this thing with, you got online classes and you have a snow day. I mean, that's beyond I thought I was the comedian. These guys are doing jokes at higher level education.
And it's a snow day before we've ever had any snow.
Like an ozone day. Yeah, like an ozone day. They predict in the future like an oracle. Oh, tomorrow will be blah, blah, blah. I always fill up my tank and top it off and then mow the lawn on an ozone day.
There you go. Hey, but what else can you expect from socialists? Let's remember that, government sponsored, government taxed, your sponsorship for public schools is socialism because they don't give you an option on it.
Right.
So now if it was voluntary, got no problem. The state can run a school so long as, participation in it from all funding as well as, schooling is voluntary. Otherwise, it's tyranny or socialism.
Well, and that's the problem, is that there's no end in sight. If you become a legislature, you think, well, I better pass a law or I'm no legislature. And as we've pointed out before, we need to start striking some of these non-applicable laws and cleaning it up instead of adding new regulations. And so this,
that's why I'm thankful for this show, is that we can begin to educate, and shows like it, because they're growing around the country.
Right.
But where we can begin to educate the public so that they can make the appropriate calls. The reason that this stuff has gone on for as long as it has is because people haven't known what to fight and work against. And, this show is part of that effort to get the word out.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, content is king. We struggle through the technical difficulties. We make it as best as we can. We try to make the sound as good as we can, but the content is king. If we're talking about what matters, that's more important than how great it sounds or looks. And so it's true. There's a lot of activity out there. I have always said that we've always been as divided as we are. It's just that now everybody is educated on why and why I don't like you, because
I think there has been a bit of a shift, and I think we've all seen it, and it's really come full bore and into the open this year. And that
Yeah.
is that there are people out there who really want to stick it to their neighbors, who really don't like their neighbors and want to get them any which way they can. And they want to use force of government. And I think that's being seen. Now, it's something that you and I have been pointing out for a long time,
Right.
but others haven't seen it. But now it's kind of unmistakable.
Well, an educated electorate, now, hats off to the grandfather of AM radio now, Rush Limbaugh. But I mean, it's only since we've become educated in the understanding of politic. I say we, the populace, the plebes, the proletariats, those people who don't live it and breathe it every day and work it. Those people who work every day and then tune in later when there's an election. And so the same thing was true with when they passed the original Constitution. They had to educate the people, and then people, once people became educated as to what the constitutional governance would be, then they were able to sell the idea. And so it's all about educating. And I think each time same thing with the Nixon era, once people became educated with what was going on with Richard Nixon, everybody got divisive on it because everybody knew what they were arguing about. It has to do with education of politics. Once again, you're joining us right here. David Oldham, Tommy McCay with 3D Politics. And we're going to talk more about the remains found in the Tulsa graves and also the reparations that are desired. Let's move on, if you're ready, David, to this is from October 21 this year. Next Star Media, remains found in search for 1921 Tulsa race massacre victims. Tulsa, Oklahoma, AP, at least 10 bodies were found Wednesday in an unmarked mass grave. And this is, I want to get into some argument on, discussion on the meaning of words. And so I want to pick out something. I'm willing to learn. I could be wrong, but I want to talk about this concept of the phrase or term mass grave. But anyway, Wednesday in an unmarked grave at Tulsa Cemetery, where investigators are searching the remains of victims of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. What we are finding, it says, they're quoting Carrie Stacklebeck, state archaeologist. What we are finding, she says, was an indication that we were inside a large area, a large hole that had been excavated and into which several individuals had been placed and buried in that location. This constitutes a mass grave, state archaeologist Carrie Stacklebeck said. Now, here's what I want to get into because I care less about the story and more about what I think. Investigators found, it goes on in the story, 10 wooden coffins. Okay. Mm-hmm. Coffins containing what was initially presumed to be one person each, which also is a point I will further on. Stacklebeck said, she said further examination of the coffins and remains which have not been removed was not needed. So my point is, I believe that, at least from a colloquial standpoint, the idea that when you say mass grave, what you mean is multiple people in a hole, no coffin. Later, it mentions no coffin. And I would even say that if you pack more than one person in a coffin, you could say then that's not individual burial. That's like mass grave, indicating what they're utilizing the word picture. When you say mass grave, you think of 100 poles thrown into a hole by Nazis that shot him right there. And you're like, okay, but these each, and I'm not trying to minimize what was clearly a bad thing with a massacre. Okay, but if they had what my argument has to do with the false media and the hyperbole used by media when they use the term mass grave to indicate each single person had their own coffin. Oldham, how am I wrong?
Well, I think it's in your thought of the use of the coffin. Typically, a mass grave is a long trench in which bodies are put, whether they're actually in a coffin or not.
Not
in this case, quite frankly, the decedents were shown more respect than, say, in Nazi Germany or Poland or, and so forth, where they were just tossed haphazard, or in Africa, with the Hutus and the Tutsis,
Right.
where they were just tossed into a grave. But the record is clear. There was a man named Clive Eddy who was apparently 10 years old at the time of the massacre. So he would have been born in 1911, and he passed some time ago, but he told historians through the years where to find these things. And he said there was a long trench in which they were placing coffins. So it was a mass grave. There was a mass burial. It was not one hole, one body, fill it up and dig another hole. It was just dig a trench and put them all in there. And they're all in there packed pretty tightly from what I understand. Now, I have not been a part of any of that, so I'm not sure. I haven't seen any pictures to see how tight they are in there. But this is apparently a large area, and the bodies that have been found, I think they're up to 15 now, 13 or 15.
As of this, there was 11, but they could be by now. It could be
found more in the next day or two thereafter.
Okay.
One of which was seemed to be more alone. It was in an unmarked grave, but there was a temporary marker, but it never got a full headstone.
Right.
And all of this is, according to what I have read, is all what they expected to find. So there's nothing surprising here or anything like that. But it was clear that what they found in the 11 to 15 bodies is that it's just a fraction of what they expect to find, which is somewhere between 150 and 300. Now, they were all buried within a couple days in the same area. So, and they weren't digging 300 different holes, 150 different holes. Right. So there were mass burials, and they also did it sort of in dead of night or in secrecy. Didn't let anybody in. The families aren't a part of it, but apparently the funeral homes had something to do with it because they've got funeral records for some of these people. And so, who knows exactly how it's all been done, but it was pretty clear at the time there was a cover-up. And
so what do you know about the I'm like a small media, 200 feet. My FM signal travels 203 feet in violation of the FCC because I'm a renegade. No, but what do you know about the original 18? Have you heard about that stuff?
Well, in the original 18, what I've heard about is that's what they expected to find here in this area. And it's where, and I don't know what the original was, whether that was an original story or if that was the first 18 killed.
Yeah, the original 18 had to do with the first 18 victims.
Okay. And so I haven't been able to ascertain whether this is the actual first 18. They still have to identify people and try to figure out whether or not these bodies actually have been were victims of homicide and weren't from some other action. And so apparently it's a quite an ordeal that they have to x-ray or examine. They can't break ground with these people. I mean, they can't bring them above ground until they ascertain that they were a victim of homicide, and then get an order from a judge to allow them to exhume the body.
Okay.
And then at that point they can then set about trying to. What's that?
Well, they've existed. So I already pitched page 1 and I had to retrieve it. We will need considerable time. They're talking to Stubblefield here, who is Phoebe Stubblefield, University of Florida forensic anthropologist. Quote, we will need considerable time to investigate them because them being the bodies they found that have been exhumed because the preservation teeth have been showing up. Okay, but non-dental structure have deteriorated, Stubblefield said. on to the idea of the original 18, Stackleback for the gal further said it was too early to say definitely that the remains are victims of the massacre, even though they were found near an area known as the original 18. Now there are two, according to the story, there are two headstones in the original 18 marking the graves of two massacre victims, but the area where the remains were found Wednesday is unmarked. Now, here's the juice for Tulsa Mayor G.T. Bynum. In 2018, he proposed looking for the victims of the violence and later budgeted $100,000 to fund it after previous searches failed to find victims. He called the discovery significant in the city's history. Now, he says what we do know as of today, and I'm trying to give GT credit every chance I can, because like what you said, there was potentially a cover up, or you seem to indicate there was. What we do know, quoting the mayor, G.T. Bynum, what we do know as of today is that there is a mass grave in Oak Lawn Cemetery where we have no record of anyone being buried, Bynum said. And so I think that's kind of the nut cutter right there.
Well, and let me say that the story is that there was cover up, because and then it was wiped from all record, all teaching. I didn't know about it. I've lived in Oklahoma for several years, and I'd never heard of the race massacre.
Yeah, but were you well educated otherwise? I mean, listen, like I complained 3 weeks ago, they taught me how to hunt whales before we had the Port of Catoosa. It was ridiculous. No reason. If you're in Connecticut, you should learn about whaling and how it is that big oil saved the earth by saving the whales, the first environmental movement in the 1900s by big oil to save the whales and therefore save the earth. That's what I learned. And yet I've never had to hunt a whale. But I had a crappy education. Okay. I mean, with the exception of music and a couple of teachers that saved me. Other than that, I don't do math very well, as you know. And so, you should see me try to leave a tip. I'm like, what is a percentage? But my point is, it wasn't like I was educated well anyway. I think each state should learn about their state specifically. We should have learned about the Tulsa massacre. We should have learned about Glenpool, etc. Go ahead.
Is that something that was taught here?
I didn't know. I didn't get it. I was in Norman and Tulsa. So I didn't get it. I never learned about it till they decided to blow it up. And they're blowing it up in a negative way. I mean, I don't know how you have positive spin a massacre, but still, I mean, the way they're doing it is just, it's just.
Well, part of the biggest problem that I see is the idea that you can litigate something 100 years on that where nobody is left alive. There's no witnesses left alive. There's no, I mean, and if there were witnesses, they were witnesses as the youngest of children. And they, they know what they were told more so than they know what, than they were witnesses themselves. And are there any left alive? But the real problem is they don't even know who the victims were.
Right.
At this point, I mean, of course, there are plenty of people who are claiming that their family members were victims. Can we tell whether or not that's legit?
Right. Let's get into
on
that.
and on and on. And so that leads, I think, into some of the other stuff that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, it does. Let's reset real quickly. Notice how smoothly the music comes in. And it'll go away that same smooth X-Lags way. Hey, you're listening once again to 3D Politics Live right here on Facebook. I'm your fantastic, perspicuous plunderer of conversation, your verbal Viking and host, Tommy McCay, with the fantastically amazing academic constitutional professor of understanding of the Constitution. We got constitutionalgrounds.com with David Oldham. Anything you need to know constitutionalgrounds.com. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Tulsa race riot, but only moving forward about the lawsuit that was filed. This is from a story September 1st, 2020. This year, September 1st, lawsuit filed against City of Tulsa asking for reparations for 1921 race massacre by Chase Horn. This is from KFOR on Tuesday. Attorney Demario Solomon Simmons and his team filed a lawsuit in the Tulsa District Court against multitude of Tulsa and Oklahoma entities for what happened during the 1921 race massacre. The lawsuit was filed against the following entities: City of Tulsa, Tulsa County Sheriff's Office, National State Guard, Tulsa Regional Chamber, Tulsa Metro Planning Commission, and Tulsa Development Authority. Now, any comments yet? Because I tried to highlight this and everything is highlighted. There's a lot more.
When you suggested this story, unfortunately, I haven't been able to look it up, but the real question is there a statute of limitations? Now, don't get me wrong.
No, it gets into that.
I hate the idea that there is such injustice. Absolutely hate it. It is absolutely inexcusable. But to be bringing this 100 years later, again, how do you adjudicate it? And the entities sued may or may not any longer exist. Okay, the sheriff's department exists, the city exists, but not in the same form. We've gone through several charter changes. The county exists as a subdivision of the state, but it's certainly not the same people in charge, and the people who would be paying for something are not any of the people that had anything to do with any of the crimes. So again, it's difficult to see how this has any merit whatsoever in a court of law, but time will tell.
Well, I mean, how does it play out for me? Because I'm not, for me, it seems like it falls across a group versus individual thing. I mean, how does a collective claim play out? Because that's the problem. They're suggesting that we're going to pay reparations, but our entire stare decisis is based on case by case, not by collective justice. And so it's absolutely ridiculous. We're going to pay a group.
Well, what it would be is like a class action lawsuit.
Yeah, and how does that one? How constitutional is that? I mean, how's that work?
Well, you would like to see it be individual, but when they're all saying the same things, it was all the same actions, they can all be parties to the same action. And so what you do is you just lump them together, and obviously stare decisis says it's okay. Well, there's a place for some stare decisis.
I got you. I mean, yeah, but
the thing is, and the statutes may actually allow for it, and it's not stare decisis whatsoever. But the real thing is, it's basically a class action, but on whose behalf? How do you have bona fides to become a part of the class action? That becomes a question. The real problem is you are now going to collect money from people who weren't even alive at the time and take their money for something our forefathers did. And the question is, how far back do you want to go? I mean, are you going to take money from white citizens for the sins of slavery, as it were? And the problem is, as we've talked before, it can't be proven that I had any culpability, so I cannot be held liable. and what this ultimately ends up with all this reparation talk is actually it's going to have to end up as a legislative action and a creation of a bill of attainder to just take the money from us. And even if it goes through court, it's going to ultimately take money out of your pocket, out of our listeners' pockets, um, and take money from them when they are not at all themselves culpable, even out of the pockets of the people who are benefiting if they were to win in prevail in the court action. So even they would be paying for their own judgment.
Right.
And with that, that is a bill of attainder and is expressly forbidden all governments in the United States. So you just ultimately can't do that. You can't ultimately tax for it. Although it's done regularly, when you stop and think about where they come up with the money for all of this stuff, it's you and me, and it's pennies. But I mean,
So I
you and
mean,
I end up
ultimately,
paying for things that we don't.
they're trying to press this lawyer, Demario Solomon Simmons, is pressing the idea that those entities listed that he is suing created a nuisance. And that nuisance is still causing a problem, he says. He told this to KFOR. They need to abate it. There was a similar lawsuit filed in federal court in 2003 was thrown out. Now, this is the thing is that so it seems like with this sentence here, they say that Tulsa and the other defendants caused a public nuisance still hasn't been resolved for 100 years later. And any normal person like you and I says, well, statute of limitations, but quoting the lawyer, Solomon Simmons, because that started in the 80s and continues to this day, opioid companies were responsible to abate that nuisance. That's what's so powerful, he says, about the nuisance law is that it does not have a statute of limitations. To me, that's a calculated legalistic move that he's decided to place his argument in that area because he knows that's his greatest defeat is that you're going to press an argument from 100 years ago. Nobody even is alive. They're not even here anymore. They voted in for the proposition 4 years ago for Vision 2025 to give us a tax increase. It's coming next summer, folks. Next summer, Tulsa City sales tax is going up by 0.26%. It's going to be like living in New York and trying to buy a t-shirt at a tourist shop. But we voted for that tax increase. Okay. But this guy here, he's like, the nuisance law is the only thing that doesn't have a statute of limitations. Oldham.
What it's actually doing is he's saying that it's ongoing. So what he's getting them for is their current behavior, which he'll have to prove, and he'll have to prove the nuisance, and we'll see. That's novel, different. It's not actually. Oh no, it's not actually reparations. He's demanding reform. He's saying it hasn't been reformed in all this time. I think he's making a tactical error because he's going after race rather than just bad unconstitutional governance, which is easy to prove. But he's a lawyer. He's in
public nuisance. He's bringing the charge on all those groups. Among the named plaintiffs is one of the 2 known living survivors from the massacre, 105-year-old Leslie Benningfield Randall, and so he's bringing this to try to get her some reparations. But if you're going for moral justice as a beautiful blue-eyed indigenous Cherokee, I mean, how is it moral and just to pay the some other race before the indigenous American Indian? I mean, I got burned better than anybody. I had to walk here from North Carolina, Oldham.
You did, yes.
Yeah,
You should already
personally.
be paid.
Well, 100 years ago, I did. Yeah, I mean, that's
And
what I'm saying. How come it's not? I can't. How come I can't take the credit for walking here? Just like she's trying to get credit.
well, she was actually, I mean, she was harmed in the sense that her family went through it and so forth. I mean, whether or not she had any harm, that would again have to be proved to be able to figure damages, what harm actually came to her. There has to be some basis, otherwise she has no standing before the court. We know that there was a massacre. We know that it was horrific. We believe that there was a cover up. I mean, through the years has been something.
Well, it's not something you brag about.
Exactly. And we know that people have not gotten justice for the homicides that were committed, the murders that were committed during this whole period. It is not like today.
Ditto 1,000 other groups. I mean,
Oh, I agree.
yeah, this is like
But
we're not.
every group has the right to every group or every individual has the right to fight, for the
Okay,
justice in
all
their
right.
particular case. And so I don't have a problem with any of that. What I'm seeing, and it's novel to say, we're really not dealing with what happened 100 years ago. We're saying a nuisance started then and it continues to today. And
I
what
mean,
that's doing is that's saying the nuisance must be changed. There may be harm today from it, and we should see some reparations from that. But it is not calling actually for reparations for 100 years ago. It's calling for reparations for the continued insult today. And that I think may be difficult for anybody to prove.
right. That's interesting because that
which is a
seems to
separate
be
issue.
Hey, I want to thank Blake Barber and Kyle Frick for watching tonight, and I know Blake is giving me some information on this lawyer here. I don't have time to look at it right now, but I will. But I appreciate you guys watching. And again, they this lawyer is going on the concept of public nuisance, which I understood the first time I ever heard of public nuisance. I never knew we are going to get this much meat out of the first two little whacks. But the public nuisance, the first time I ever learned of public nuisance was around a swimming pool. The person was going to have a swimming pool built. And what they explained to me was that even if you have a fence that keeps them out and a sign that says you can't keep out, if some kid climbs into your swimming pool and gets drowned, you're still liable. It's called an attractive nuisance is what they called it back in the 70s. And so, I mean, what's the difference between a public nuisance and an attractive nuisance? Sounds like prostitution to me, David.
Well,
hey,
that attractive nuisance thing griped me back in the 70s.
yeah.
There was a Rockford Files episode on that.
Oh man! Wow.
Where Jim Rockford was getting sued because a guy climbed up on his roof of his trailer and fell off. And because he had left the ladder up there, it was an attractive nuisance. And so therefore he was trying to get the money out of Rockford. And that drove me nuts. Well, which was what it was intended to do.
Oh my God, that's funny.
And that was part of the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing now. I can, thank, I can't think of the producer writer's name, but he created the A-Team and all the others. But anyway, his whole thing was to kind of make people aware of this sort of thing. Right. And so anyway, yeah, I mean, it is
public news.
The real thing about the public pool is they were closing down North Tulsa public pools, and they had and they were being used. There was less use of the ones toward the south, toward just south of Admiral on Memorial at 21st Street one, and that one was all dried up and was going decrepit. That one could have been filled in, but wasn't. Instead, they were filling in ones that were being used by the community. Why? And that was the big question, and I think that's where they're getting into this. If there's a way to prove that this is racial bias or this is a bias toward a part of town, then he might be able to, he would easily have a case. But that's the question: does he have
Well,
the smoking
okay.
gun?
And if you
Because
get
otherwise,
if you get reason,
what he's doing is he's guessing at the racial
well,
aspect.
it's like an ambulance chaser. You know, did a thing happen that was bad to somebody? Yes. Well, let's see if we can get some money out of it. I mean, I'm not trying to minimize what was a bad thing, and
Right.
bad things happen to my family, and bad things happen to your family. And 100 years later, you're going to hold somebody responsible. It's more merciful and justice worthy to allow for the mercy of the people today that didn't have anything to do with the massacre, to let them off the hook rather than to pay for it. There's more Christian virtue, mercy in the action of not holding someone accountable. It's ridiculous to try to make it someone today that has to be educated about what they did wrong to pay for it. Yeah, they don't even know, they have no idea what they did wrong. And furthermore, if you're looking for moral justice, I can present you a story that should be in line first. Okay, my story came here before you ever shipped anybody from Africa. My Cherokee people were effed from day one, well before anybody else. So, you know, we lived on the East Coast, and they said, Tom, you got to walk to Oklahoma. That's what they said.
Yes, that's what they said. They
It was
said,
a
Tom,
bad day, and I
get
want
off.
reparations. See, and what's true from a Christian moral virtue ethic, and I think you can agree with me, we don't really want justice. We don't really want justice, because if we had to have justice, I would have to pay for my sins. I want mercy. I want mercy.
Right.
I don't want
Right.
justice.
I
don't want
agree.
justice.
Well, and this is where ultimately it comes down to the answers for all of our domestic ills, our political ills, our societal ills, is just to live the golden rule. Treat others as
Right.
you want to be treated. If you want mercy, give them mercy. Let's leave each other alone, and things will be a lot better off. We'll all be a lot better off. And and let's be a little more forgiving. So, but that
Look
said,
at me asking for
justice,
mercy.
well, we
Oh,
all
my
need
mom's
it.
not watching. Oh my gosh, you hypocrite.
Well, the thing is that just at the same by the same token, justice to needs to be done. My faith says that the land is still polluted with the blood of these people because justice was never accomplished. I mean, it's ultimately come because those murderers have suffered the fate of all murderers, but the thing is, it wasn't done by the people and the apparatus that were supposed to have done it. And hopefully through this process, some of that will be seen that it's changed,
Yeah.
and that we can accept the change as sufficient payment.
Well,
Hopefully.
yeah, and we have made changes that aren't being recognized in
Yes.
this lawsuit, I think, and also the city of Tulsa that he's suing is no. I think I mean you're eliciting this response from me, from what you said, Oldham, and that is that the city of Tulsa that they're suing is not the city of Tulsa that exists anymore. I mean, it's literally not.
Well, again, remember their lawsuit. Well, their lawsuit isn't based on what happened 100 years ago. They're saying the noose has started then, and it's followed all the way through all the various changes to today, and they still are doing the same kinds of things. They're still discriminating against the same people that went through the massacre. And that, if they can prove that that's what's going on, usually these things come down to, do you have emails where that kind of thing is said? Do you have the video of the guy saying that
Meet me at the massacre?
Yeah, well, no, of the guy. What did Biden say that if you're a there's good students, or there's the good students, and then there's the black kids or something like that. It was, that, you have the white kids and they're the good ones. And then, if you have that kind of discriminatory mindset that you can bring out and show is happening, then great. I think he's got a case.
So I mean, my gosh,
and again, remember, I think he's made a mistake. It's easy to prove that they're acting unconstitutionally, they're acting unjustly. Trying to then take it another step and make it about race and racial discrimination, that's where I think he loses it. Because
right.
Keep it simple.
I would absolutely agree. Let me just reset us here. I want to thank again. Hey, Blake Barber made a great comment here, and then he made a stupid one too. But right before that, he said, because I said something about Christian virtues, he said, such virtues are not tied to religiosity or faith, Tom. And I would say, oh, yes, they are. Religion is a study of man, and theology is a study of God. So, but listen, here you are listening to Tommy McCay with 3D Politics, your fine host, your verbal Viking, along with me, David Oldham from constitutionalgrounds.com, all things constitutional. I never knew we'd get so much meat out of the reparations discussion, but we certainly did. I do want to see in the last few remaining minutes if we can press on to the scientific fascism and the national mandate. One of the things I've noticed about the whole mask mandate concept is that it really has way less to do with the object of desire, i.e. the mask, as it does have to do with how many people can they get to play along. It's really almost as shallow as an ice bucket challenge. It's like, how many people can we get to scare into the idea of wearing this damn mask? Now, let's see, the mask thing. Okay, I'm going to try to share. I'm literally going to try to share. Scary, I know. My God, we're going to try to share closes. We did that. We already looked at that data. Okay, here it is. Okay, and this is what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the share, because what I forgot to do was say share computer sound and optimize.
Yeah.
And now we are going to share this 2-minute clip. Can you see this?
But we have control of this. We can do things that could turn that around.
So I understand, you don't want to wade into politics, but masks are not political, right? They shouldn't be political, right? And we see the president at these rallies and people don't wear masks. And Joe Biden does have a really different plan, right? And today he talked about it, and he specifically talked about making mask wearing mandatory. Here's how he put it.
First, I'll go to every governor, urge them to mandate mask wearing in their states. And if they refuse, I'll go to the mayors and county executives and get local masking requirements in place nationwide.
He also wants to make masks mandatory, federal buildings, interstate transportation. Do you think this is a good idea? Is this what a president of the United States would be helpful if they were doing, fighting for mask mandates?
Well, one of the issues that people that talk about mandating not be a good idea, because then they'll say they have to enforce it, and there's going to be a difficulty enforcing it. But if everyone agrees that this is something that's important and they mandate it, and everybody pulls together and say, we're going to mandate it, but let's just do it, I think that would be a great idea, to have everybody do it uniformly. One of the issues, though, I get the argument, say, well, if you mandate a mask, then you're going to have to enforce it, and that'll create more of a problem. Well, if people are not wearing masks, then maybe we should be mandating it.
So in other words, but it sounds like what you're saying is sort of the power of the commons. But you're going to have some people who don't wear them. You only need to have a certain amount, and a mandate could get you there.
Right.
Even if you don't have enforcement, right?
Right.
So
right, exactly.
Okay. So when you mentioned vaccine, and I know you spent a lot of time on that, and you also spent a lot of time on.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Because, if I could get just 80% compliant, if I was a tyrant, that'd be enough. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
I'd be good if I could just make you people just do what the hell I say all the time, by 80% and let 20% of you little effers run. You know?
Right. Yeah,
Wow.
that's why we need, that's explains it all. I mean, is there anything more tyrannical than somebody who's going to dictate to us and is willing to try to enforce it and cram it down our throats? And he's going to go anybody and everybody who's going to be willing to cram it down our throats. The thing is that, again, what makes America interesting and unique in the world is that we disagree with one another. I completely 100% disagree with the mask. 100%. And I never wear a mask in my private life. If I'm working, sometimes I have to put on a mask because otherwise I don't get work. But if I am outside of that instant, my mask is off. I never wear a mask. Why? Because I see alternatives. We need to have that discussion. We get to have that discussion unless you live in one of the other tyrannical states where they arrest you for having that discussion, like New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and so forth, where the mandate is in place, like Fauci and Biden want to see happen.
Well, when it comes down to just simple autonomy, if we're going to play checkers and chess, if you're going to mandate me to wear a mask, then I'm going to mandate that you remind me every time I walk in.
Well, no,
You know what I'm saying? If you're
here's the
going to
thing.
force
If
me,
you're
I'm going to
gonna
force you.
if you're going to mandate me to wear a mask, then I'm going to mandate that you prove I need to wear one. Now, prove in a court of law. Remember, my liberty cannot be deprived me without due process. Your liberty, everybody watching, our liberty cannot be deprived us without due process. Where has your due process been to say you have to go around with a mask and you are a criminal if you don't have it? Where? It has not happened.
So
it's
hey,
another
David,
bill of attainder.
let me ask you this, because one of the things that bugs the hell out of me when I venture out from the little hidey hole and I drive by the Golden Driller and he has a partisan mask, because wearing the mask is a partisan statement.
Sure.
And people say, oh, it shouldn't be political. I don't care what it should or shouldn't be. Here it is. A mask is a political statement. Now we spend bipartisan county dollars to upkeep and maintain that golden effing driller. But why do we have a partisan message on the Golden Driller right now with that LBGT mask on?
If you live in the Tulsa County area, and especially that part of town, you better be voting against the current incumbent county commissioner who is up for re-election.
Who's that?
And Karen Keith.
Oh,
she is the Democrat. She is up for election right now.
Karen Keith
You had better be voting for Josh Turley.
I tried to get him on the show. I put out a call to him yesterday and I didn't get a response, but I will tell you that Karen Keith puts the Karen in commissioner.
She does. And sadly, we've had at least one Republican county official come out and endorse her over Josh, and it is unconscionable to me that could happen, because he has been so free with our money, and so she is not a spendthrift in the nearest sense of the word, in the most kind sense. She is as liberal with your tax dollars as anyone ever could be. So, we need to get rid of that kind of that kind of leaders because they don't
I feel
care about us.
it's almost like she has more addiction to being a performer than she does being civically service minded. I mean, she
She used to be on
pretends the
TV.
service, but I mean, look, whether she's a broadcaster or however I can get attention, that's the way I do it. You know, I wanted to be a rock and roll star, it turned into a comedian troupe. Now I do this, you know, it's pretty bad, isn't it? But what
So,
the heck? We do what we can, don't we? The thing that
yep.
I always wondered is they tell us back in Reagan, they said, oh, trickle down economics doesn't really work because we're not connected. And yet then today it was like, oh, we're all in this together. That's what trickle down economics is. We're all in this together. That's the reverse. Anyway.
Well, it's only good if they're in control, not you, the consumer.
Well,
And
yeah.
that's what we got to remember is they want control of your life and money.
So, hey, we've only just got a few minutes because you know how we're pressed by our advertisers that we have a hard break at 8 o'clock. Of course, my wife being the advertiser, get me in here and cook. So it's just not even true. But the governor extended the state of emergency. I had a thing on this. I'm not going to bring up the PDF, but there's shit. It's 9 pages. Wow. It's 9 pages long. Like when he passes a state of emergency extension, it's an executive order. It's filled with licensure and such. You know what I'm saying? It's got all the it's got this stuff here, David. Okay. Do you hear that buzz, or is that just me? Can you hear a buzz,
No,
Oldham?
just you, unless it's from my mic or something.
Okay, it's just me. Right here is the this thing was just October 24th, a couple days
Right.
ago. Blah 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 blah. Coda. He's gonna, because Kevin Stitt, pursuant to the power vested in me by Section 2, and that's the thing I wanted to ask you about. The governor is I don't know if you can see what I'm doing, but it says Section 2 of Article is that 6 of the Oklahoma Constitution. Hereby, so he is operating, controlling all 77 counties according to that article. Or now, it seems like it's constitutional. And one of the other things that he's doing is he's extending what I think is a ridiculous, what they call emergency. Remember, it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. I promise
Right.
I'll never mail you a check. Isn't that the line? Anyway. Yes. Okay, I'm back. So anyway, all those other things, plus I'll mail you the check. But I mean, you know, how is it that he can just extend this over 77 counties? Is that constitutional?
No, it's not constitutional because it's in violation of the U.S. Constitution. Remember that he has no legislative authority. He can't. The only thing that he has power to run is the National Guard, or constitutionally it would be the militia, and he has power to run them. And since we're all part of the militia, he could give orders to us to a degree, but that's only in the time of invasion or rebellion or insurrection, a riotous insurrection.
Well, they're going by the word emergency is what is the key word.
Well, and that's the thing. They have tried, and this is where my criticism of the governor from the get-go was. It's where the and all of a sudden I can't think of his name. The attorney over in Oklahoma City who David Van and I spoke of at length back in April, May, when he was when he took exception to what the governor did, and that was the misuse of the statutes. Now he's going into the articles, and he's trying to say that he has the authority to make these changes, and to order us around, or order these departments around. Remember, most of these departments, especially the licensing agencies, are unconstitutional in the first place because, again, they violate your right to be free. Instead, what they are doing is they're saying you are a criminal unless you abide by all of their rules and regulations, which are outside of legitimate constitutional authority.
So from here's the story from KOCO staff. Oklahoma City Governor Kevin Stitt extends state of emergency related to COVID-19 pandemic. Governor Kevin Stitt on Friday issued an executive order extending the state of emergency related to COVID-19 that's been placed since March 15th, everybody. And this health crisis, quote, this health crisis still exists and still needs to be addressed in the various ways by executive order stated. According to the governor's office, the amended executive order removes the previous extension of all occupational licenses and gives licensees 60 days to pay or renew any licenses extended by prior orders. Much more dogma from the state and licenses Oldham.
Well,
it's just total crap. Is that not total crap? Because even in the state of the pandemic, as he pretends to help, it's all through the leverage of the licenses and licensees, right?
Oh, absolutely. Everything, all of your mandates, all the reason that you have all those signs on the doors of these businesses isn't necessarily because all these businesses are so civic minded that they care so much about the mask. No, they're getting pressure from all of the licensing entities coming down, putting pressure. And I'm telling you, the hairdressers couldn't get back into business because the dentistry board was putting pressure on the dentists, and the hairdresser board was putting pressure on the hairdressers, and it was weird how one was affecting the other, and this, that, and the other thing. Back when it was going on, it has proven itself to be the extortion tool it has always been, but people believed the lie that it was really out for our benefit. And they have proven it, and here they prove it yet again. But what they're saying is the money's drying up at the government. They want their money. So even though there's an emergency, yeah, no more extensions, pay up. But these people haven't been working to make money to pay up. So all because of the stupid actions of government in the first place, forcing them to shut down. So in reality, the government owes them big time, more than they could ever pay. And Mr. Stitt owes it personally for all of his actions, quite frankly.
Well, I didn't like his tone. I can tell you that.
To the extent that he's netting his net fortune. I'd say that of every governor, every mayor, to the extent of their net fortune, they should be personally liable for all the damage that they've caused.
Wow, that's a whole show right there. But from the finalizing of this KOCO story from Oklahoma City, the executive order also updates hospital and testing reporting requirements and modifies the days on which Oklahoma State Department of Health is required to provide a summary of information to the governor from daily to each weekday. Now, from daily to each weekday is a lessening of restriction. That is, you do it fewer days. That's 5 instead of 7. Correct. Now, correct. So this is where I think they're mixing the tares with the wheat. I mean, sure, it seems like he's backing off. To anybody who's having to actually put the numbers together to report to the governor, they're like, thank you. You gave me 2 days off. right? But otherwise, he's continuing the ruse of emergency. It's less than 1% death rate. We're closing everybody down and telling me I'm responsible for your health. I mean, it's a bad system. It's a bad plan. Okay. You should be responsible for you. Otherwise, if I'm responsible for your health, I'm going to need $200 a month from you. Well, actually from everybody. Anybody that sees me that I'm responsible to wear a mask for needs to pay me $200 a month. Okay.
There you go.
Just absolutely
I like
ridiculous.
that idea.
I'm responsible for your health means you're responsible for your own liability to pay me to take care of your health is the bottom line. But section 2 of article, what is that? 6, section 2 of article 6, those Romans, they had a whole thing that they did. Section 2 of article 6 of the Oklahoma Constitution says Governor Stitt can do stuff that he usually can't do if they call it an emergency. Now, when I first got into arguments with the city council, it was over the curfew for teens back in 1996. And when I went to argue with them,
let's just read our section 2 of
let's
article 6.
do it. Let's
real
do
short.
it.
I've got it up, and it says the supreme executive power shall be vested in a chief magistrate who shall be styled the governor of the state of Oklahoma. That's all it says.
Well, how does that apply?
It doesn't. Because what they're doing is he's saying that because I'm governor, I get to. And remember, I have talked at length, and I still hope to see this catch on someday, is that they have this belief in the divine right of election, that when they get elected, they have divine authority to do whatever they want. The Constitution be damned. And that is what we see being exhibited here. Article 6, Section 2 says absolutely nothing about an emergency, just that he's the governor. He's the governor. He's still limited by the legislature, still limited by the law, by the Oklahoma and U.S. constitutions, which he swore to uphold. And then he's limited by the statutes themselves. So none of this, it's all smoke and mirrors. But because he is governor, because he is the chief magistrate of the executive department, therefore he can issue certain executive orders to the executive department. So long as they don't apply to you and me, he's legit.
Well, here's how stuff.
Well, the problem is that he's issuing executive orders that are unconstitutional because he's saying, get to work, you licensing agencies, and collect that money, because that is an unconstitutional act because the licensing agencies are unconstitutional. So
listen, I got to reset us. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Linda Mitchell Collier and Kyle Frick. And of course, what will we do without Blake Barber out there every time we go to keep us in line and make sure Tom doesn't get too stupid? Tommy McCay right here with 3D Politics. And I want to thank Alicia Bashara McCain for showing up. Also, David Oldham with constitutionalgrounds.com. Go out there, constitutionalgrounds.com, to find out all things constitutional. Wow, we've just mowed more meat out of this than I ever thought we could. I really do, even though we're a little bit longer than I expected. Hi, Tommy. I do want to talk about constitutional textualism. There's more on the state of emergency, because that's how the city council got away with passing a Tulsa municipal employees retirement package under an emergency clause. That was back in 96 when I first started arguing with the city council about the teenage curfew. But so the government exceeds its authority typically when it pretends there is an emergency. That is basically how they overreach is by making you believe that today is different than any other day, and it's different world we live in, and that we have to take care of business because the sky is falling. I have a real quick tip before we move on. Oldham, I do want to get your take on constitutional textualism. I said to somebody I was trying to get on the show, and because I'm a textualist, and they were like, "Oh, really?" I'm like, a textualist. Like if I say Thursday, I mean Thursday. Like, anyway, we're going to get into this constitutional textualism before we get out of here. Uh, but I want to remind everybody, if you're going to have a kid and this somebody told me this, if you're picking names for a child and you want them to be a great football star, American football, not your soccer stuff, never name your kid Dak Theismann. He's never gonna. Okay, so anyway, okay, welcome to the field, hobbling onto the field, Dak Theismann. Sorry, it's an ankle joke.
Okay.
You don't watch it, do you? I mean, Dak got jacked.
Not nearly enough.
Well, I'm telling you, I already had a problem in 2019 with all the referee stuff. I don't watch it until next year.
I'm completely done. I'm watching the World Series for the first time in a long time because they actually have fans in the stadium. They had 11,700 fans the other day.
Yeah.
Which is nice. It's nice to see people catching home runs. My Dodgers are in it and up by a game, so that's nice. But I mean, it sucks that there was only a half a season, but I do like where things are at. So but no, I'm not watching professional sports at all.
I'm not even watching.
I see it.
Yeah. And I went over to a buddy of mine's house last night, and he had a game on. I'm not even sure what channel it was on, but he froze frame it while we were talking because he knew we were going to talk. And it was they literally have like South Park animated figures with masks on, pretending that those are the and I was saying to him,
in the seats,
in
they
the
had masks.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, so if that doesn't tell the fans how insulted they should be, this is how they view you. You're no better than a two-dimensional animated character, and a poorly animated one at that. But then if you live in the world of animation, why are you putting masks on them? It's pretend anyway. If you're going to have fake guests with fake crowd noises, let them not wear masks. It's absolutely ridiculous.
That's hilarious. Well, and if you look, they only have those go up a couple through rows, and then they're done. And it's usually right around the 50-yard line, maybe in the end zones, but that's it. Not all the way around the stadium usually.
They can't even sell out to the animated crowd. So, okay, constitutional textualism. Let's talk about, for the deep-minded, and Blake is still out there, I hope. Textualism. I'm all like, the word means so to set this up, I had a friend of mine, very dear friend of mine, she said, I don't necessarily believe in the Constitution because when they said all men are created equal, that's not what they meant. And then all the other stuff that makes it good, but that's not what they meant. And so for me, if I was arguing a contract and a year later I'm trying to press my person I made a contract with, and they said, oh no, that's not what I meant, I'd say, I don't give a damn what you meant. Here's the text. That's textualism. If you said all men are created equal, I don't care what you meant. The words say people should press on the text of the words all men are created equal, not what some dip said that he didn't mean. What do you think, Oldham? Constitutional textualism, what is it? The historical view, what are the legal ramifications, and what's the colloquial application for proletariats like me?
Well, I think in order to understand the words and understand, like the Constitution, you have to understand prior documents and philosophy in order to understand what they did mean. Now, textualism has a couple of different forms that people look at it. Kind of like saying conservatism, and it's like, what does that mean? There's, 3 different definitions that I have been able to ascertain that people stick to, and you can't get them off of their definition for themselves. And so textualism, or what is also called originalism, Justice Scalia kind of brought these terms to the fore, because he actually, to his credit, he was calling people to get back to the original meaning, the original text of the Constitution, instead of, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg has often said, the living, breathing document that means just whatever they want to say it means at the time.
Right.
And so he said, no, you got to actually get back to what it means. Now, when you talk about originalism or textualism, what the text says, you have different camps within that group. And you can just go back to the founders and say, okay, are you a Hamiltonian Federalist, or are you a Madisonian Federalist? Or are you a Patrick Henry anti-Federalist? Or, there were three camps of original textualists. But the one thing that they all agreed upon was, the statement from the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Okay. Now, when they said that, they meant free men, not slaves. Okay. And this goes back to, again, going back to originalism. How far back do you go? Do you go back to John Locke and Algernon Sidney and the philosophy that led to our government, unique in the world? Or do you just go to some of the writings of some of the founders? And, you have the idea of Hamilton, who wanted to set George Washington up as king.
So
Okay.
let me clarify this. When if they meant free men, why didn't they say that? I mean, in the text, it doesn't clarify that.
Well, and again, this comes back to the thinking of the founders. They assumed everybody knew what they were talking about.
Okay,
because
hold it. Like everybody else.
No, that's fine.
So that would be considered a loophole. Let's say we pass a law in some sort of tax law, and well, that's what we meant. We don't give a damn what you meant. And we go by textualism. Here's what you wrote in your law. Okay. If all men are created, this in fact is the brilliance of the founding, and why I disagree with your concept that they meant only free men. I believe the founders meant all men. I don't believe they meant only free men. And that's why they wrote it that way.
Well, all men are created equal, and they did mean that, yes. But you could lose your freedom through slavery, and you could become a slave under the Lockean and the founders' thought process. Is you could legitimately lose your freedom if you engaged in an unjust war. You could lose your freedom and become a lifelong slave and be sold off to somebody else who would keep you a slave who had nothing to do with the war. Okay. And in their minds, that worked. That was okay. You could also gain your freedom from slavery, and then be back to that free man you were born as. You could be taken away and made a slave, just made a slave for whatever, without having done anything wrong.
Okay. So there's all sorts of ways that due process can take away property and rights. So all those things you mentioned were pushed through due process. But what I'm saying is that according to textualism, if the text says all men are created equal, there is not a qualifier that says if you're free. And if I'm pressing it in court, I'm going to say it doesn't say if I'm free. It says all men.
Well, again, Yes, unless you have lost your freedom. And again, you can even go to the
Well,
the
yeah, I'm
14th
saying within the
Amendment,
legal
which,
realm of, yeah, right.
right. I mean, the 14th Amendment indicates that slavery is not to be considered as forbidden, ones who are rightly adjudged to, and within the prison system. I'm paraphrasing greatly, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so the 14th Amendment even acknowledges that, and that continued to be the thought process. So you can lose your freedom, and yes, you're born free, but once you've lost that freedom, that could remain for a time or indefinitely. And so the problem with your friend's concept is that it is naive and ill-informed to history, because
Most my friends.
there were caveats to the statement, and you have to understand those caveats. You may not like the caveats, but they are what they were.
Well, right.
And understand the philosophy, and then you know what, it doesn't change anything, because the first day of the first year, the first act of the first Congress that could end the slave trade, the buying of slaves from Africa, they did it. Okay, January 1 of 1808, that was the first thing they did, and it ended. And so they did have in mind all men created equal, and they were going to keep it. They were going to end that. They
Right.
kept the slaves that were already here and so forth, but no more buying and selling, no more wanton, slave trade from Africa.
Well, the Missouri Compromise had it phased out over 25 years. They wouldn't even let you be a sex slave, or I mean, like indentured servitude is what I mean. That's a joke. I think that the 3/5 argument, where it's like, the slaves were counted as 3/5, and everybody's like, see, they thought we were 3/5 of a man. No. That was a scientific argument, a mathematician's argument against a simple gatherer hunter. There's one good one. Hunter gatherer,
It was
like
a
the
tax
agrarians.
argument. It was
The
a tax and
agrarians
representation argument.
do what?
Well, what it was the North didn't want the South to have more representation in Congress, and the South wanted the representation in Congress, but didn't want to pay the tax, and the North wanted them to pay the tax. So the North, the compromise was to say, okay, here you have all these slaves. We're going to count the slaves as 3/5 of a free person for tax and representation purposes. Because remember, there was a capitation tax that when they did the census, they then tacked on a capitation tax, and a bill was sent to the state. And the state then paid the tax bill to the feds for the number of people in their state. Well, the only way to get around paying, not paying, having representation, not having representation, came down to having the slaves be a proportion of their of
Population.
of the population, and that's
Right.
what it was. It
and
had
so-
nothing to do with anything else, but everybody wanting to get money and representation.
Except when it comes to the calculation of the actual funds, where the representation came in for the black men, for the black race, came in at 3/5.
Well, it wasn't for the black race, because remember, there were
I
free
said
men.
that wrong to rush to my point, though.
Okay.
The 3/5 number that represented that population, the proportion, when they calculated at 3/5, is what the scientists knew, that there's no such thing as 3/5 of a man. Just like in the census says people are having 2.5 children. There's no such thing as 0.5 child.
Correct.
So the scientists knew that they were building in. Is my argument is that the the founding fathers knew with the argument of the 3/5 representation for the slave population was an argument that would ultimately lead them to full representation, because knowing if you can count one guy as 3/5, you're going to find a whole guy there. And they knew that ultimately the science would catch up with the constitutional ideals. It's just my idea.
I think you're basically correct. I would explain it slightly differently. That was that everybody was going to gain their freedom, and then they would be counted as a full person, as they are to be today.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, ultimately it gets there. The science argument was only used for political purposes to oppress and to keep people in, outside of the mainstream and the protection of the laws. So, and that was
so. All right, to finalize this puppy, when it comes to the colloquial application of the concept of textualism, I mean, in today's world, when I'm doing a contract or talking to my friend, how does the idea of textualism work into application for just you and me at the bistro?
Well, the way that it works, and this is why we have to go a little bit more than just the text, but we do have to have that, because the text is when you come to a text, okay, the Ninth Amendment says what it says, and it says that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people.
Okay.
Well, okay, it's very clear, and if just taking it at what it says, it's saying that anything not enumerated or not specifically mentioned remains with you and me. So any freedom remains ours. Any right remains ours. Well, the Supreme Court has argued that they get to decide what the Ninth Amendment covers and what it does not, whether or not you have certain rights or not.
Right.
And so when you go to the original understanding of it, you have to go to the people who said what they meant. When, for instance, when John Madison introduced the Bill of Rights, he said this is the catch-all. So we know that it's a catch-all that protects all other rights as we commonly understand them.
Okay.
So you have to go back to the common understanding of the time in order to understand the text. And as soon as you do that, you know that the arguments for the Glucksberg test and of the Supreme Court, and all of this garbage is just that, garbage. Why? Because John Madison actually said so.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why you see people pointing to the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers and stuff like that, is because we're trying to give a fuller understanding of what they were actually driving at. And there's a lot of things that are kind of behind the scenes. They're in there when it's taken in its proper context, but you can easily read into it whatever you want if you don't keep in mind the mindset of the founders and those that influenced the founders.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, that's a great explanation, David Oldham.
And sorry,
Go ahead.
Finish the thought.
Yeah.
What does it mean for us? Well, it means that in the colloquial understanding, it means that when we get it, when we understand what the founders meant, we can better fight back and hold our representatives accountable. When we hold our representatives accountable properly, they quit getting away with all the garbage that they've been dealing us over the last 150 years. That's what it means.
Very good. I think that's well stated and well explained as we push through all of the minutia. All that stuff is tough to understand. David Oldham from constitutionalgrounds.com explains it well. Tommy McCay, your verbal Viking here, plunderer of conversation, perspicuous host on 3D Politics Live every Monday from 7 to 8 p.m. or more. I want to thank Blake Barber, as always, for being out there. Alicia, Bashira McKay, Linda Mitchell Collier, and Kyle Frick was out there tonight, too. David Oldham, I appreciate you being here to bring all your excellent understanding of stuff. It looks like we have gone live. We have worked out some of our technical difficulties from last time. We're smoothing in and out our stuff. David, I appreciate you seeing. Don't forget, David Oldham, constitutionalgrounds.com. You can catch me, Tommy McCay, right here, Facebook and Twitter. David, we're going to send you out of here. There he goes, David Oldham, and there I go. We'll see you guys next week.